where the trustee can spend money for certain things, pay for certain expenses, buy certain things for the beneficiary, but it's not money in their pocket yet, which leads to the vulnerability. Hi, this is Jeff Marsace, the Plain English Attorney, and today we're going to talk about protecting the next generation and the wealth that you're leaving to them. Now, we're not talking about protecting your wealth while you're alive. We're talking about once there's that transition to the money going to your beneficiaries, how is it going to be handled and how is it going to be protected? And we've got a couple of different ways to do this with various limitations depending on what you're choosing. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. So shielding wealth in the next generation. Now, by far, one of the best planning tools for estate planning is the Revocable Living Trust. It's going to avoid probate. It's going to get those assets at the proper time, transition to the next generation. But what is it going to protect and for how long? So there's typically an age of outright inheritance. That means you're choosing an age that makes sense. Now, most of my clients, they're picking an age of 40 for that outright inheritance. Now, that may sound like it's a long time, but the idea is those assets are going to stay in that trust until the trustee thinks that the beneficiary is ready or they reach age 40, whichever's going to come first. So there is a lot of protection there up until they reach the age of inheritance that you pick, where the trustee can spend money for certain things, pay for certain expenses, buy certain things for the beneficiary, but it's not money in their pocket yet, which leads to the vulnerability. If you think it's important for educational videos like this to get out there, then please help us out by subscribing to the channel. So what's it going to protect against? The money that's in the trust is going to be protected from lawsuits and creditors of the beneficiary, divorcing spouses of the beneficiary. If there's a need for disability or if there's a need for Medicaid, those assets aren't subject to the spend down. Now, that's as long as they're in there. Now, the trust that we use through my own office or through the estate planning source, there's triggering language that's in there. If the beneficiary is under a disability, then the age limits are off the table. It's completely in the discretion of the trustee in order to preserve their benefits and have those assets there for the things that the programs won't pay. So that's already taken care of, and it doesn't matter about an age limit. But, and this is the important point, there is no protection once the money's distributed. It's in the beneficiary's hands. It's theirs. And all of the vulnerabilities that come with potentially owning property and assets that people may want to take away. Now, the contingent beneficiaries, again, it's dependent on when it's distributed. So if the assets are in the trust and the beneficiary passes on while there's still assets in the trust, then it's going where the people who set up the trust said. Typically, it's to their descendants, but it could be to anyone. If it's already distributed, and this is something I've sometimes have to get through to my clients, yeah, this trust is going to say, okay, it goes to this child at age 40, they get it, and then it's theirs. Oh, well, what if they die? Well, then if they die before it leaves the trust, then it goes to their descendants. Oh, well, I want it to control where it goes after it leaves the trust. Then we can't do that. So we can't say once the property goes to them and it's now no longer subject to the terms of the trust. They must do this, they can't do this, they have to do this, or they can't leave it to this person. No, once it's in their pocket, it's theirs. So what other levels of protection do we have? Well, there's the other extreme. There's the asset management trust. For this, the beneficiary, there's no outright inheritance. So those assets stay in the trust for the lifetime of the beneficiary. Oh, does that mean they don't get to use any of the assets? Well, no. It is protected from lawsuits and creditors and divorcing spouses and disability and Medicaid, and it is solely in the discretion of the trustee, but that's what's giving it all of the protection. And it's meant and used an awful lot when we do what we call in-law planning. So instead of the assets ever going directly to the child, it's going into their specific individual asset management trust, where there is a different trustee who's in charge of it to look out for them. So, we want to, my spouse and I, we want to buy the dream house. There's enough money in the trust to do that. Well, okay, let the trust buy your dream house so that you don't own it. And this way, if there is a divorce and the spouse wants to take half the house, well, they can't. It's not titled in the spouse's name at all. It's not even titled in the beneficiary's name. It's titled in the name of the trust. And then it must go to the beneficiaries, that the people setting up the trust, like it's the parents down to the child, and then it has to go down to the grandchildren. Oh, if there are no grandchildren, then typically it's other siblings. Now, the way these kind of work in tandem when there are multiple children is typically when the children reach a specific age, they're trustees overseeing their siblings' trust. So the siblings are always looking out for each other. Now, depending on the family situation and dynamics, that may work out well so that it's siblings protecting each other, and if one of those kids passes on, then it's like aunts and uncles who are looking after the grandchildren's inheritance. So it's a very solidly protected plan, but there's no control by that actual beneficiary. So what else do we have? This is where we can bring in the beneficiary trust, which is kind of a little bit of control, but not completely. It's an outright, quote, inheritance by co-trustees. Now, usually I don't advocate for co-trustees just because, it doesn't work. But this has the duties split among co-trustees where one of them is the beneficiary. So it is protected from lawsuits and creditors, divorcing spouses, disability, and Medicaid. And again, no protection once it's distributed. But how is this actually going to be working on a consistent basis? There is that beneficiary co-trustee, and there's something called the special co-trustee, who is chosen by the beneficiary. So now the beneficiary can't spend money on their own. That special co-trustee has to be there to have that money come out. So there's not 100% control. Can the beneficiary invest money the way they see fit? Well, yes, but again, there's always that special co-trustee who's involved. So they get some kind of override powers if a situation comes up with creditors and bankruptcy and lawsuits, divorcing spouses, all that stuff. If a situation comes up where the beneficiary's in trouble, that special co-trustee has a process to remove them as the trustee, and therefore it's locked down. It kind of at that point transitions into an asset management trust. So the way this was kind of explained, the difference between an asset management trust and a beneficiary trust, is that the beneficiary trust is, quote, for the good responsible child. It's to provide them a means in which to have this inherited property protected throughout their lifetime. But what you're not concerned about is crazy investments. You're not really concerned about them spending money. You're concerned about the outside forces. The asset management trust is you are concerned about them potentially making bad investments, or there's this influence from a spouse to spend money unwisely. So even if it's not them who would be, just spending the money on their own, it's okay, there's a spouse kind of whispering in their ear to spend money a certain way. It's protected against that and all of the creditors and all that other stuff, all those outside influences as well. The reason we use asset management trust when we do in-law planning is because you have to be able to tell your spouse, no, I don't have access. I don't have access at all. It's entirely in the discretion of the trustee, which is not me, the beneficiary. So that's why we typically use the asset management trust. Now, I'm just going to make a quick note for my own clients. I'm using the terminology that the estate planning source, the company that I work with a lot, and recently I was at their Advanced Institute, taught several sections. This group, I'm describing it the way they did. In the past, I sometimes referred to asset management trust as a beneficiary trust and mix that language up. So if you're one of my clients and you're concerned, just go ahead and ask. But chances are, even if I was calling it a beneficiary trust, it's probably an asset management trust. So it's locked down tight. So really, you've got these 3 different trusts that have different levels of protection. Now, the Revocable Living Trust, you're always going to start with as the base of your plan to avoid probate and all that other stuff. But we're talking about protection once you've passed on. That revocable trust can provide a lot of protection up until that age of inheritance. And that's usually what most of my clients want. They don't want to, quote, reach out beyond the grave and control things. But I have other clients where it's not about controlling things, it's about protecting. So most of my clients see that, okay, age 40, there's that transition into the beneficiary's name, fine. Then there's I don't trust the spouses at all, or they're in a very high lawsuit rich protection, or maybe they already have some big judgment against them for some massive lawsuit and you don't want them to get that money directly. All right, asset management trust. And then the third is, look, I've got a child, or my children, they have their own stuff going on, but they could end up potentially being targets for lawsuits. There may be some concerns there, not about the spouses, but just outside forces. Let's give them some additional protection in the form of the inheritance coming through a beneficiary trust. So that's the 3 different types of trust. Now, if you want to learn more about in-law protection planning, check out the course inlawplanning.com. But we also have a free webinar, inlawplanningwebinar.com, where you can sign up and get that webinar for free. So I hope you found that information useful. As I always tell my clients, please stay safe, plan ahead, and enjoy life. And whatever you do, make it a great day.